Let's talk about the minefield of informality in academia, especially for tenure track professors, but also for graduate students, postdocs, adjuncts. It's really somewhat universal. In particular, I want to talk about a few different arenas of these kinds of informal minefields. The hallway conversation, the mailroom conversation, and meals, lunches, and especially dinners. Let's dive in. Let's start with the mailroom conversation, and let me begin by sharing something from my world. I remember to this day vividly walking into the mailroom as assistant professor, getting my mail, and then running into a senior colleague who is, let us say, known for being a little bit salty, not necessarily the most skilled interpersonal communicator. And the person just blurted out, "Well, Mulaney, it's good to see you around." And then we had a 30-second, exchange, and then the person left. I went into tailspin scramble mode. What does that mean? Am I not showing up enough on campus? I come down, 4 days out of the week. I live up in San Francisco, but I make it down. What does it mean? Do I need to show my face more? The kind of anxiety that can happen when a senior colleague says some passing remark that doesn't matter one a dime of difference in their mind, but really does in a junior colleague's mind. And it sort of sent me into a tailspin. Another example was a little bit less, shall we say, disturbing and more just embarrassing. And these are things that many of us experience, where you walk into the mailroom and maybe it's someone at the same career stage or senior or junior, it really doesn't matter, but someone blurts out some kind of small talk and then you say something like, well, yeah, and then insert complete non sequitur, unintelligible joke here, and then the conversation ends. Both people go their separate ways, and you are left thinking to yourself, what did I just say? And then you can sit there and think about what you should have said, or the joke you could have made, or something of that nature. And it's gone. Of course, the moment is gone, and you're left with this completely awkward exchange, and probably goes nowhere, but of course you can't help but wonder about it a little bit. There is something about the mailroom in particular, and any kind of shared space, if you have a coffee maker or photocopy machine, where the following happens. Two or more people converge on a separate space. They are each entering that space, carrying with them whatever mind state they had on the other side of that door. They could be coming from a class, they could be coming from a discussion, they could just be arriving on campus, they could have just had a fight with their spouse, who knows. But you walk into these two spaces, and then in an exceedingly short amount of time, these two people need to calibrate to each other's consciousness, to like their states of being, have an exchange where both sides feels like they're kind of in the flow and prepared, and then break off and go their separate ways. And in my experience, 7 times out of 8, it doesn't work. You are not prepared for whatever the mental curveball it is that your colleague sort of shouts out. Now, of course, there might be pleasantries like, "How are you?" or "How was your summer?" something like that, of course. But if there's anything more precise than that, at least for me, my brain is often not ready to turn the corner, recalibrate, and then come up with something that I want to say. And 7 times out of 8, I feel like I left, sound like an inarticulate child when I leave. There's something about these interactions that, probably everybody thinks about, everyone jokes about, laughs about, but there's a particular kind of weird stress for tenure track assistant professors because, of course, at that stage, one is always measuring facial expressions and one is always thinking about their position, which is sort of probationary and vulnerable. And so there is one space where I kind of want you to understand that the mailroom is a place to be a little bit prepared. I would say a bit, not like you have to rehearse something before you walk in there, but just know that it is a space where these kinds of interactions happen and, you can feel a little bit off. They don't go anywhere. They don't have any repercussions, but they do and are a source of anxiety. Now, at the same time, I'll say on the positive side that mailroom conversations have been some of the most important in my career and in my life. I remember having like a breakdown heart to heart with a colleague when I had to explain that my family is going through a housing crisis and we were going to lose all our savings. And I don't know why that was the moment that I decided to open up, but it was. And my senior colleague gave me great advice, told me to seek help where I needed it. And that wasn't something that I scheduled with them for a coffee or a lunch. I wasn't even planning on talking to this person about it. But the mailroom is this place where these unexpected things can happen. Some really amazing and really wonderful, and then some that leave you cringing. So mailrooms are one of the places of where I would describe as the minefield of informality. The second one is related but different, and this is the hallway conversation. So let me give you a scenario that's very common in my experience. You and your colleagues have a department meeting, and in that department meeting, something of some importance is discussed. It could be something contentious, it could be something that has repercussions. Inevitably, the people who spill out of that meeting are going to start clustering and clumping into groups of 2 and 3 and 4 and having hallway conversations about what just transpired, what they think about it. Sometimes sotto voce, like quietly, and sometimes a little bit too loud. And these are spaces and arenas that are as much part of your professional world as the formal around the table department meeting that you were just in. Similarly, there can be hallway conversations like this, and also stairwell conversations like this en route to a department meeting where something of some import is going to be discussed or something potentially controversial is going to be discussed. This is a different kind of arena than the mailroom because this is something you can prepare for, and in fact you should. So if you're thinking about how do I prepare for the upcoming department meeting or the discussion, set your watch not to the beginning of the meeting itself, but to 15 minutes before, 5 minutes before, and 15 minutes after for these kinds of informal hallway and stairwell conversations that almost always, and I would say inevitably, take place. There's a few reasons why. One is, as I think you'll come to find in your own profession, your own world, lots of decisions are made in these hallway conversations. Lots of alliances are formed, lots of things are pre-decided, such that when the department meeting happens, there's sometimes a kind of scripted element to the discussion among individuals who have already really decided which way they're going to go on a particular decision or how they plan to frame something. And so you would be at a disadvantage if you just imagine that all of the decisions are made within the confines of the department meeting. Now, at the tail end of the department meeting, the kind of hallway and stairwell conversations that happen afterwards, there's a different set of issues I want you to be aware of. And this is, for lack of a better word, confidentiality sensitivity. I cannot count the number of hallway and stairwell conversations that I have either been part of or witnessed where people are talking way too loudly. They're talking in a way that someone down the hall or around the corner from them could overhear. And if this pertains to anything of any confidentiality or any sensitivity, then you do not want to be having these kinds of conversation, in the midst of your department office where sound travels. And this is especially true for those of you who are assistant professor or are in these kind of vulnerable positions. Let's say that you spill out into the hallway and you end up in one of these clusters or clumps, and it's you and 2 very senior people. Well, maybe they have no fear of God in them. They're safe. They're very opinionated, they're very boisterous, and let's say that they go on and on, not sotto voce, like at some volume, about this, that, and the other thing. And this is a problem, maybe for them, but certainly for you. If you are in the presence and it looks like you're participating in a conversation that's sort of spilling out confidential or sensitive things about a decision that maybe divided the department, maybe was something that there was a lot of, passions were running high. You don't want to be seen from the other side of the hallway as if you are acting insensitively and so cavalierly with this information in that cluster. So, my advice to you is that if you are in the presence of people who are completely safe and boisterous and not conscious of their surroundings, and they're going on and on at high volume about something, you want to make your phone ring fake. Be like, I'm so sorry, let me just check this. Oh, that's daycare, or that's my spouse, or that's, whatever. Oh, I have to teach a class. You can always say that. I have a student. I have a meeting with a student, and get the hell out of there, because this is related to other tutorials and videos that I make. Is sometimes, and sometimes, oftentimes, I think if a department culture is not as healthy as it should be, more senior people can act very cavalier with respect to their junior colleagues on subjects that have no blowback possibility for them, but do for the junior colleague. So here's an example of the senior colleague who feels it their right to constantly lean over into your ear during a person's job talk or during a department meeting while the chair is speaking and making some sort of comment, not a mean comment or a rude comment, just talking, and you're sitting there being like, I'm assistant professor, I can't tell you to put a cork in it, but everybody's looking over here, including the chair, and you're making me look as if I am the class clown, like I am the disruptive one, and I don't want that association, because I'm not, because I want the chair to have, to have the floor, or whatever it might be. There are these little moments when this can happen, and hallway conversations, in my experience, are one of them. Now, if you are part of a cluster or a clump, let's say, that is in the hall and is talking at a reasonable volume, or has more intelligently said, let's step outside, let's go outside and go get a coffee together maybe. I think in those circumstances, it is entirely within your sort of purview, right, to talk as a fellow colleague, to share your thoughts about what just transpired, or even better, to ask questions about things that you don't understand. Like, I noticed that there was some sort of showdown between person X and Y. I've never seen them act like that. What's the backstory of that? Is there anything that I need to know about this issue moving forward? Because I was really surprised by the intensity of that reaction that so-and-so had, whatever it might be. You are a colleague. You are a colleague. You have every right to engage in this, and you should, because this is where decisions are made. This is where policy is shaped, et cetera, et cetera. But you want to do it as careful and as intelligent of a way as possible. Let's also pull the frame back a little bit more. Let's say it's a senior colleague, a junior colleague talking too loudly in the hallway about some issue that someone could overhear. Well, there are still other people who are even more vulnerable than you, who your actions here could have either real concrete repercussions for, or at least anxiety-producing discussions for. I'll give you one example before we move on. Distant past, I can recall a search in which one of the candidates was already a postdoc member of the department and therefore had an office in the department. And I still recall one of these clusters or clump conversations. I wasn't privy to this one, but I could hear it discussing the search itself and the vote that was being made at a volume that if that person had been in their office or had walked to the water fountain or had walked to the bathroom at that particular moment, would definitely have heard people talking about them. And that is not only unethical and not right, it's actually, under that circumstance, it's a breach. And so just be very careful with hallway conversations. Prepare for them, be aware of them, exit if you feel like something is not going well, or if you have the bravery, be the one to say, I think maybe we should take this conversation outside. Maybe we probably want to move away from the department office if we're going to talk about this. Your other colleagues will appreciate that intervention, in fact, if you do it well. But hallway conversations, major minefield when it comes to informality. This brings us to the last one, meals. And here I'm thinking less lunches than dinners, because there's something about the nighttime, there's something about dinner time that has a kind of intimacy and informality that can lead people off their guard. There's alcohol involved. It's just a possible recipe for someone to conduct themselves, to speak at length, loose lips sink ships kind of moments that you wake up the next morning or when you get home and say, I think I went on too long there. This is a pretty simple point. I won't dwell on this. Be careful what you drink. Be careful how much you drink. And decide in advance, not in the moment, in advance, what your strategy is going to be in this realm, this particular realm of informality. Do you want to kind of keep things to professional discussion? Do you want to steer things away from discussion of family life or private life? That's your decision. It's entirely fine to do. I like talking about my family. I do not mind talking about, things that are personal to me, as you know. But at the same time, it's even if you're like me on that account, you still want to have boundaries. You want to kind of write them down on a cheat sheet in your purse or your wallet so that every now and then you can go to the bathroom and check on it. After you've had your one beer or your one martini, remind yourself, I am here with a colleague and I don't want to worry or regret about anything. I don't want to feel like maybe nothing will come of oversharing or telling someone what I really think of this colleague or that. Maybe nothing will come of it, but at the very least, you will regret it. You'll worry about it, and maybe something will come of it. So just when you're in that context, particularly of the nighttime, that particular realm of informality, just watch your words, maintain your composure, know your boundaries, and have a good time. Definitely have a good time, but just know that it is a space where things can be said. I will see you in the next tutorial.